Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Jo Mulholland. I'm the training officer for the Northern Ireland Botanical Skills Project. This webinar is one of a series of webinars that we've organised as part of the Northern Ireland Botanical Skills Project, which aims to support botanists across the skills spectrum with training events and online webinars like this one. I'd particularly like to thank our funder, the Department of Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs, DERA, who funded the project from the Carrier Bag Levy Environment Fund. The whole project's organised by the Botanical Society of Britain and Ireland. This is one of a series of talks. They're usually on Tuesday evenings all through winter, and then we're going to have a wee break just over Christmas. We've got lots of other webinars coming up, ranging from New Year plant hunt, plant ID apps, robotics, I can't say that, pathogenic fungi, hawthorns, moths and plants, rushes, orchids, all sorts of different topics to look forward to. So just a few things about this talk. It is being recorded, so you'll be able to watch it again, and any of the other talks that are held, you'll be able to watch as well afterwards. We have a question and answer function at the bottom or top of your screen, depending on your layout. And if you'd like to put any questions in there, and Rachel will be very happy to answer them at the end of her talk. And I've already haven't introduced Rachel yet. So I'd love to introduce our tonight's speaker, the wonderful Rachel Murphy. She's the volunteering manager at Plant Life. She's worked within the NPMS partnership and directly with NPMS volunteers since 2019. She's had over 12 years experience managing and engaging volunteers, data standardisation and coordinating national plant monitoring schemes. She's a very keen advocate of citizen science and the huge value volunteers add to research and conservation. And finally, she's a passion for public engagement in science and making nature accessible to diverse audiences. So now I'm delighted to hand over to Rachel.
Oh, thank you ever so much, Jo. Give me seamlessly share my screen there. Jo, if you can just let me know that you can see that all okay and you can hear me all right.
Yeah, that's great, Rachel.
Yep, perfect. Brilliant. Before I just troop on. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, everybody, and thank you for joining us this evening. What a lovely activity and what a series, a lovely series it sounds like you've got coming up to help us warm these cold winter evenings. I think I may be signing up to a few of those. My name is Rachel Murphy, as Jo said, and I'm the volunteering manager at Plant Life. And yes, I've been part of the National Plant Monitoring Scheme partnership for nearly 7 years now. And I'm really looking forward to sharing about the NPMS with you today. Especially as you see from our title here, we're actually have been running for a decade this year. We are celebrating our 10-year anniversary, and we do think it is a milestone worth celebrating. So for anybody new to hearing about the NPMS today, I'm going to start by introducing the scheme and its aims, as well as revisits its value for existing volunteers, of course. Some of you may already be familiar with the NPMS. And I plan to cover what the NPMS actually entails and how taking part can be fun, rewarding and well supported. I plan to reflect on 10 years of monitoring and look ahead to what's next, sort of from an accessibility sort of point of view, and building survey coverage. And hopefully we'll finish in time for your questions. I might end up rattling through, as Jo will know, I can talk about NPMS all day, but I'm determined to leave some time for questions at the end. So first of all, thinking about why this work is essential. I mean, I'm talking to the right audience here, aren't I? We know that plants, being the foundations and the building blocks of terrestrial habitats, plants have the power to transform our landscapes. They're really vital to understand and monitor. It's really, really vital, to understand and monitor their abundance, their diversity, and how their communities are changing, and really to appreciate how this might affect any other species that they, of course, support. So with major changes taking place and declines in biodiversity across habitats reported, it was really crucial to have a better, and it still is really crucial to have a better understanding of plant populations and changes over time. And so NPMS was designed to meet a need for a systematic approach to plant monitoring, which was identified as a high priority within the terrestrial biodiversity surveillance strategy, which was published by the Joint Nature Conservation Committee back in 2008. And actually the need remains for habitat-based plant monitoring. We need an indication of plant diversity and abundance through time. We really need a large scale, standardized and systematic approach, as I said, to plant monitoring. And it's really important that the scheme is really accessible and inclusive to a wide audience and getting more folk engaged and interested in botany throughout the UK, but while also maintaining robust and standardized methodology and data standards. So the NPMS was designed and developed by the 4 core partners that we can see here. We've got the BSBI, the UKCEH, the JNCC and Plantlife. So for anybody who isn't familiar with these many acronyms, I'm well aware, the Joint Nature Conservation Committee is the public body that advises the UK government and devolved administrations on UK-wide and international nature conservation. The UKCEH, or the UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology, is an independent, not-for-profit research institute, and they carry out environmental science across land, sea and air. The BSBI is, of course, you will all be aware, is a botanical society for anybody interested in the flora of Britain and Ireland. And in more recent years, we've been supported by DAERA, as Joe's mentioned, with the scheme's expansion to Northern Ireland, and now with the current Northern Ireland project to increase coverage over in Northern Ireland. And of course, we have Plantlife, which is where sort of I sit within the partnership. We are an international charity for the protection and restoration of plants and wild plants and fungi. And we're really involved in the volunteer management, support and training sort of arm of the NPMS. So along with these partners, the scheme was co-developed with volunteers on the ground during a really inclusive trial phase with contributors and volunteers from a variety of backgrounds and experiences. And after a number of development years, as you can imagine, it took quite some time, and a pilot phase in 2014, the NPMS was launched as it is today in 2015, making, as I say, this year, 2025, our 10th anniversary year. I think that's worth a party hat and a couple of balloons. So the National Plant Monitoring Scheme, as the name suggests, is UK-wide. It's a citizen science habitat-based plant monitoring scheme that covers major freshwater and terrestrial semi-natural habitats. The scheme provides an indication of changes in plant diversity and abundance across the UK's habitats through time, and it really helps to gain a better understanding of habitat health. And the basis of NPMS, in a real nutshell, is that across the UK, monads, or simply put, 1 kilometre squares, have been randomly designated, and volunteers across the country can allocate themselves 1 or more of these squares to survey twice a year. But we'll discuss that. I'll cover that in a little bit more detail shortly. We can see here how the coverage has grown to what we see today. If you visit our squares map on the NPMS website, you'll see something that looks a little bit like this, showing you the allocated squares in orange. So that's those with volunteers currently assigned. And in blue, we see those squares that are available to take up. So you can see we have a number of sort of lonely heart squares, shall we call them, waiting for eager volunteers to take them up, our blue squares. Each time we reach around 70% of survey squares allocated, a new tranche of additional squares are released. So I think we're on currently our 3rd tranche at the moment. Yes, since the scheme began. So currently we have around 1,500 volunteers allocated 1 or more squares. And to date we have around 1,200, actually more. I think we're nearing 1,300 squares with data returned. Some of them with 8, 9, nearly 10 years worth of data. Our volunteers have conducted over 8,000 surveys to date. And I think it was this year actually we broke the record of a 250,000 biological records have been recorded by our volunteers to date. And monitoring the NPMS habitat plots in this way each year really provides an unparalleled opportunity to track and understand the responses of plants to our changing environment. So from extreme weather events like droughts, so I'm thinking about the summer of 2018, I remember the year before I started, where the NPMS data indicated increases of bare ground and increase in the abundance of species that are better at tolerating these stresses during that season. Also, we saw certain orchid species being recorded by our volunteers in ever more northerly locations, to the increasing fertility of many UK habitats. And monitoring the key indicator species is providing evidence of the effects of eutrophication and its impact on species intolerant to nitrogen. And we're already seeing differences in habitats for these key indicators over time. And also actually the impacts of non-native species. The NPMS is the only citizen science project that allows us to see how the most invasive species are interacting with native plant biodiversity across the UK. In 2023, NPMS researchers published a paper on climate exposure analysis, and that reported that warming temperatures have seen some wild plant species such as bee orchid and pyramidal orchid expand their ranges. Some rare Arctic alpine plants, including Norwegian mugwort and mountain sandwood, are also likely to be at risk of going extinct in Britain as our uplands become more temperate. And the study also suggested that human-driven climate change is actually likely to fall hardest on arable and horticultural land, also calcareous grasslands, so that with high pH, urban areas. And according to the findings, actually, I believe it was calcareous grasslands are the most exposed semi-natural habitat to the effects of climate change in the UK. Oops, that just flicked through. So a really major achievement as well for the NPMS is the experimental indicator. So NPMS data are used in the Plants of the Wider Countryside UK Biodiversity Indicator as an official statistic in development. So it's still classed as an experimental statistic owing to the fact that we are quite a young scheme thus far. We still need more years of data. And NPMS is also contributing to England level trends as well, actually, also in development at this point. And we're really looking forward to a new Plants of the Wider Countryside indicator being released later this year. These UK biodiversity indicators, published by DEFRA and the JNCC, provide an annual view of how a variety of groups of wildlife and other indicators of action for biodiversity conservation have fared across the UK in recent years. And it was in 2020, I believe, was the real landmark year for NPMS volunteers, because that was the first ever contribution of NPMS data to a national biodiversity indicator. And it was really the first time the annual habitat indicator has been contributed through volunteer effort. So, and that's specifically for NPMS data from 4 of the scheme's best surveyed broad habitats that we can see here. NPMS data are made publicly available. Species records go to the National Biodiversity Network, BSBI, of course, and GBIF global data. And from sort of more recent NPMS climate exposure analysis to the Natural England Living England map, and even more widely, we believe that NPMS data have been used in over 650 studies to date. The recent launch of a new page on the website is certainly worth looking at, our indicator species trends. That showcases the current trends from NPMS volunteer data. And that new trends page allows you to view the current annual abundance estimates for any positive or negative indicator species within a broad scale NPMS habitat type. And we've linked that to the BSBI Plant Atlas 2020 website. So that provides photographs of all species, and all plots can be easily downloaded into 2 separate formats. So that page is actually publicly available, meaning that you can head to the NPMS website now or after the talk this evening and take a look at the species trend for a species you're interested in each habitat type. A new addition to the NPMS website. And you can find out about that and plenty of other work that's ongoing in our annual reports or our website, along with our volunteer newsletters and news pieces. we're really one of our key achievements as well over the last 10 years is improvements in our digital access. So in addition to the trends visualizations, we have an NPMS app that's been developed and launched, making field recording and data submission simpler for volunteers. Our website houses access to verification messages directly from our verifiers over an iRecord. And our website user journey is continually reviewed in line with really valuable user feedback to maximise the volunteer experience and access. It's really changed actually quite significantly over the last around 5 years in particular. We had a little bit of a boost of funding to make sure that our volunteers could really take a good look at the different information that was available for each square. So again, if you do take a look at a squares map and click on any square at all, you'll be able to see if it has previously been surveyed, how many times it's been surveyed, at what level it's been surveyed, what species have been recorded, indicator species, I should say, any images that were taken. And we've also been improving how we house our scheme's training offer, both in terms of booking in-person events and also how we provide online training resources and provide our online webinars and workshops. And over the last 10 years, the scheme's actually really enjoyed an active annual programme of training and engagement events, so from species and habitat focus sessions to more general field skills. The offer includes a range of online and in-field activities that mean we see participation from hundreds of volunteers every year. And that programme has really expanded in recent years to include an overwinter mini-series, not too dissimilar to the one we're doing tonight. And that really makes the most of lessons learned during COVID around remote and online training. And I'll cover a little bit more of that fully later. Another thing I just wanted to mention before we really dive into the methodology is I wanted to mention, of course, the scheme's commitment to diversity, equality and inclusion. So we want biological monitoring to really be inclusive and as accessible as possible to as many folk as we can, with DEI considerations really threaded throughout every aspect of our work programme and delivery. So in fact, the NPMS and its partner organisations that I've mentioned are really active members of the UK Terrestrial Evidence Partnership of Partnerships. I think I've said that right. It's quite a tongue twister, but it's also known as UK TPOP. And that's really a collaboration to strengthen and unify the efforts of organisations, a large number of organisations running biodiversity monitoring schemes and their volunteers all across the UK. And at the start of this year, UK TPOP partners published a joint statement called Nature for All, and that pledges our commitment to diversity, equity and inclusion in species monitoring schemes. And together we're really working to build and support inclusive skills that reflect our society and strengthen our conservation efforts. So within the NPMS, we've conducted volunteer DEI surveys and a number of feedback surveys and produced a number of reports. And subsequently, we have an NPMS DEI strategy written. I think it was we were the first scheme within TPOP partnership to have one. And then, of course, we've got the activities that have stemmed from that, including things like we have additional volunteer roles created, aside from, of course, our surveyors. So roles such as photography volunteers, data entry volunteers, verifiers, to really increase and improve access to the scheme and offer further ways to get involved, perhaps for people that aren't able to get out into the field or perhaps have different commitments or time commitments as well. Also updates to our website and our user journey, as well as our training and event considerations, to name a few. We've actually recently held a big anniversary event to celebrate these achievements over the last decade, and the great progress made by the scheme, and all of the presentations and talks from both stakeholders and actually volunteers, who it was absolutely fantastic to hear from, were all recorded and they've been individually uploaded to the NPMS support YouTube channel. So do head over to take a look at that at any point if you'd like to hear more from our partners and indeed our surveyors on their experiences. Also more about the data insights from colleagues in the UKCEH, and also how NPMS methodology is being used at a landscape scale. So thinking about getting started, if you're new to the NPMS, how can you get involved? How can you find out more, or indeed if there's even a square near you? The first thing to do is to visit our NPMS website, not of course just to learn more about the scheme and peruse our various online resources, but also to take a look at our squares map. You can do that by looking at squares near me, just as the slide here shows, and there you can discover if there is indeed a survey square available near you. You can either do that by returning absolutely all squares and taking a look and explore around the map, or you can pop in your postcode and do sort of a radius search. Say I want to look within my postcode, for example, and that'll bring up any existing squares, whether allocated or available. The map's got some lovely features showing you different boundary outlines, so that can give you an indication as to whether the land falls within any sort of wildlife trust land, national trust land, for example, any triple SIs. So do take a look at the map near you. And once a volunteer has registered with the scheme and requested and indeed been allocated a square, they receive their survey materials, including survey guidance notes, species and habitat lists, and also survey forms and a map of their 1 kilometre square. They also get a species ID guide. So the ID guidebook was actually specifically created for the scheme. It's lovely and compact and concise, so it's easy to stick in a backpack and take out with you, and it's actually organised into flower colour. And it contains only those indicator species that we record within the NPMS. But of course, volunteers can and do supplement with their own ID books of choice. What else do we have in the image here? The guidance notes, of course, explains the details of the methodology. The species list handbook shows which species are to be recorded for each habitat, dependent on the surveyor level, excuse me, which I'll go through in a moment. You can also see the recording forms tucked behind there. And of course, we do also have the app, as I've mentioned, for out in the field. And all the materials are available as a digital survey pack and are fully available for download from the NPMS website if you would like to take a look before thinking about whether you might like to get involved. Our volunteers then spend a recce period getting to know their square and the habitats within it, establishing locations and appropriate access permissions for their survey plots, up to 5 small survey plots. Of course, we don't ask our volunteers to survey the whole 1 kilometre square. Otherwise, I think by the time they finish, they'd be started again. Once they've decided where those smaller up to 5 plots are, they then need to let us know by creating their plots sort of digitally on the NPMS website so that they're ready to enter the data later for the surveys, so that that data can be allocated to the correct locations. So just quickly thinking about how our volunteers set up their plots. They use a very simple field kit. They set up a 5 by 5 metre square to visit just twice a year. These can either be a square 5 by 5 metre plot where they record the GPS coordinates, make a plot sketch, make a written description, and of course take an annual photograph. But where appropriate, volunteers also set up 1 by 25 metre linear plots along linear features such as arable field margins, hedgerows, or a watercourse. And actually as well, woodland plots are larger as well at 10 by 10 metres. So they're the 3 different main types of plots that we record on within the NPMS. It is worth saying, of course, that when people do join up to NPMS, they do receive training. They can either join online training on how to set up and survey on their plots, or they can join in-field training. But each volunteer prior to recording the species in the field actually needs to decide which level they wish to survey at. So all the forms and the app can be used for any of these levels, but there are the three key levels that you see here. And this was really part of making the scheme accessible to as many folk as possible, but still, as I say, using a standardized and robust survey methodology. So the method itself actually doesn't change between the levels. It's more the number of species that are recorded. So we have the wildflower level, which includes smaller lists of around 10 to 15 species per habitat type that we ask volunteers to record. We have the indicator level, which is an expanded list of species divided into groups applicable for the habitats, maybe around 30 species per habitat on average, and that includes some species which are perhaps a little bit more challenging to identify. And then we have the inventory level, which is designed for volunteers who are capable of recording and identifying all vascular plant species which they find in a habitat. So as an example, the wildflower is a relatively simpler level in that there's that reduced list of species to record per habitat. So thinking of an example of, say, dry deciduous woodland, which is a fine habitat type within the NPMS, that actually has 20 species that need to be identified or recorded if they are there at the wildflower level. And they include things like hazel and cleavers and ivy, holly, and so on, wild garlic. Whereas at the indicator level, there's an expanded list of species. I believe there's 30 species in dry deciduous woodland, with the additions of things like wood sedge or wood millet and wood speedwell, for example. And then, of course, as I say, the inventory level is recording all vascular plant species present within the plot. And you see these lists when our volunteers are allocated a square and they are sent their survey packs, which contains the species list. And again, this is available to download from the website. You'll see within each habitat type, so the example shown here is neutral pastures and meadow, you have a list of all of the indicator species. Those species with the little wildflower symbol next to them, that's all that we're asking wildflower recorders to actually record if they're present or not, and the abundance, which I'll go through in a moment. So we're only really looking for quite a reduced list here of around 15 species. If a volunteer is recording at the indicator level, they'll be looking for all of the species on the list here. And you can see in that indicator column, it is a plus and a minus to denote whether they are positive indicators for habitat health or a negative indicator. And actually, rather handily, in the last column there, you can see which page number to find that species on in the field guide, which is super handy when you're out in the field and want to double check. So all of our recorders, irrespective of what survey level they're conducting their survey at, use the same recording forms, which again are replicated on the app. So they use one form per plot, and they actually use that form for the 2 visits. So you can see we record everything from the surveyor's name, what level at which they're surveying at, what plot number the survey is being taken on, the GPS coordinates, and then all your sort of supporting environmental information. So thinking about how steep the plot is, what the aspect of the plot is, what the management type is, if known. Of course, that's an optional. Grazing level, how wooded the plot is, and then also vegetation height. There's also space on the recording form for folk to do a plot sketch. That helps them to relocate the plot in future visits. And then lastly, we actually have where we record the species within the plot, of course, taken from the species list that I've just shown you there for that habitat type. So I've already mentioned here with the additional survey information that we ask volunteers to record. Quite simple. We talk about slope aspect, how steep it is, management description, grazing level, how wooded, and vegetation height. Now, I don't know How many folk on the call may be familiar with Domin scale? It can be a little bit daunting if it's not something you're hugely familiar with, but actually it's a really lovely and simple and standardized way to record cover of a certain species within the plot. So we're talking about the percentage cover of that 5 by 5 meter plot, for example, and providing a category score. So, for example, if less than 1% of the plot of your whole survey plot contains that species, and actually it's only one or two individuals, we give that species a score of 1. If it's less than 1% of the plot, but there are several individuals, they get a score of 2. If it's between 1 and 4% of the plot, we give a score of 3, and so on. So we have these categories, these score categories that we record each species. Of course, I mean, we're almost programmed, aren't we, to try and make 100%, but we always say to folk, you're not going to make 100% because we do have these categories, but also there's going to be species within the plot that perhaps aren't on our species list, taking up space. Of course, we're talking about plants that grow in levels, so they may well be smaller species underneath larger species. Of course, there may be bare ground, leaf litter, and such. So we just give each individual species within our species list a score within the Domin scale. And that NPMS data really does help to detect annual trends and species groups and of different groups of species, sorry. Also looking at non-natives and climate-sensitive species, as I've mentioned previously, and it looks at direct impacts of physical events, such as severe weather. We've been seeing differences as a result of changes in land management and also links with other species groups, such as pollinators. So for anybody aware of the pollinator monitoring scheme, which similarly has 1 kilometre squares, just as NPMS, actually their 75 squares across the UK overlap with NPMS squares. As I've mentioned, our volunteers are offered a whole host of training and support. We have online training webinars and online training workshops, sort of more interactive workshops where we can work through things together. We run things like how to use botanical keys, plant anatomy workshops, and we find having a mixture of online and in-field sessions give more folk opportunity to participate. We also have one-to-one data surgeries as well as group data surgeries to help folk enter their data at the end of the season. And we have online virtual meetups as well as face-to-face training opportunities and face-to-face volunteer meets. So do take a look at the website for any upcoming training events. It's quiet at the moment, but I'm about to put up our winter mini-series which covers everything from habitat classification to actually wildflower poetry. We try and do a real range of things over the winter period to keep folk speaking to each other, engaged, and yes, just keep our eye in really over the winter months. As I don't know if I've mentioned, but all these events are available and free to registered NPMS volunteers. And as many of these events as we can, we record, and they are provided publicly available on the NPMS support YouTube channel. And as I say, when folk first sign up with the NPMS, we very much encourage them to take part in either an in-field training event where we go through survey methodology, plot setup, how to use your recording form and what you're recording on the day. And I know that Joe, who's on the call here, and Kim are planning to do a number of these in the new year in Northern Ireland. They can be really, really helpful to actually get out into the field and actually have a practice at setting up a plot. We do, though, also have online survey methodology training for anybody that can't make the in-field events, perhaps if they're too far or you can't give up a full day, for example. So do keep an eye out for those. It is possible to do those online as well. So thinking about looking ahead, I've already mentioned Nature for All and our continuing commitment to NPMS DEI strategy. I think a really big step will be auditing auditing, I should say, our training materials and our website for accessibility and inclusion. But it's just generally really important that we make sure that accessibility and inclusion, and indeed representation, is threaded throughout our whole work plan. Thinking about scheme growth and coverage, the NPMS is really looking to expand our reach in under-recorded regions, including Northern Ireland, also Scotland, particularly in highlands and islands and in remote areas. It's a really common issue across all terrestrial monitoring schemes. Actually, that it can be very difficult to get folk recording in those more remote locations, for a mixture of, accessibility issues, also fewer people actually living in these areas. We also, of course, need to target efforts towards vital landscapes. Excuse me. Including, for example, raised bogs, montane habitats, and some of our at-risk coastal habitats. Oh, we've put the heating on and I've got a dry throat. So I'm thinking there about salt marshes and mackay. And actually, not only the vital habitats, but actually those that are less represented within the scheme. So those, unsurprisingly, owing to greater difficulty in accessing, as I say, and their occurrence. I've made a note here about collaborative working as well. So building new and maintaining existing relationships with large-scale landowners is really, really important to us to grow scheme coverage and to improve retention. So thinking about large-scale landowners that overlap existing NPMS survey squares. And we also have an ambition to include NPMS within actually their own monitoring programs where that's applicable. I think Joe I'm not sure, may have a comment towards the end about some of the activities that are ongoing, particularly next year within Northern Ireland, around working with local large-scale landowners, and also thinking about volunteering in groups. Thinking about our indicator, with more data, of course, and growing confidence and accuracy in the NPMS data, we're aiming for all the NPMS reliant indicators to move from in development to actually assessed official statistics with UK biodiversity indicators. That will be a really, really important step for the scheme. And you can hear more about that and the ambitions for that from Dr. Ollie Pescott at the UKCEH, if you do take a look at our NPMS support YouTube channel. There's a fab talk on there, a really popular talk actually, from Ollie Pescott, providing data insights and thinking about our data ambitions for the UK biodiversity indicators. And then lastly, I've put a little note on here about to remind myself to say about local and landscape scale monitoring. There's really great potential in NPMS Plus, which is a branch of NPMS that was piloted to enable landscape scale monitoring utilising NPMS survey methods. So we're really interested in exploring ways to increase the resources for those who may wish to engage with NPMS Plus and employ NPMS survey methodology at a local scale. If anybody on the call here actually is an NPMS volunteer, I tend to just always say a big thank you. Thank you very much for your support and for being such a fantastic community to be a part of. It's a very welcoming community. We love to hear from volunteers. We have something called Volunteer Voices. Again, we've got a fantastic Volunteer Voices video on our YouTube channel if you'd like to hear from anybody that actually actively volunteers with us. We like to hear from them whenever possible. We tend to use plot portraits, use volunteer images, hear volunteer stories within our newsletters and annual reports, for example, because ultimately, without our volunteers, none of this would be possible at all, and we wouldn't be able to be getting this incredibly useful and robust data nationwide. So a huge thank you to our volunteers that make it possible, as well, of course, our funders, the JNCC. And thank you ever so much for listening, even though I'm croaking my way through towards the end here. I've just about come in with plenty of time for questions. So, Joe, is the preference, do you want me to stop sharing, or shall I just carry on answering questions while sharing my screen? Is there any preference?
If you want to keep sharing, that's fine. Thank you so much, Rachel, especially with the cough you managed to get through.
Oh,
To the
sorry
end
about
there.
that.
No, that was brilliant, and so clearly everything's so clearly explained. Your statistic there for 250,000 records achieved this year. That's absolutely brilliant. So yes, we have some answers in the Q&A box. If anybody else has sorry, not answers, questions in the Q&A box. But if anyone else would like to ask a question, and we have a hand raised as well. But if you, we'll have a look at those first, Rachel. The first one is about global warming. There's a question about, are we able to predict experimentally which plants would survive in future global warming? That's quite a big question.
My audio off. Gosh, wouldn't that be great to be able to do that? So what we have taken a look at in the most recent research is which habitats are more or less at risk. So we're looking at the habitats in particular, rather than species specific. But as I mentioned, it does indicate where certain species, perhaps their ranges are expanded, but then equally those species, which their ranges are really being, pressed very, very tight, particularly those upland species that I mentioned, where, as I say, their ranges are really being confined. So we can get an indication. I don't think we can predict which plants would certainly survive, but we can start to take a look at which ones are more or less at risk.
Yeah, no, it's a very big question. That we've got a question about nature for all. I think you touched on this actually about about the resources and things. It's just asking what NPMS has for visually impaired people.
Oh, that's a brilliant question. That's certainly something I mentioned. We're planning to do a bit of an audit of our training and our resources going forward, and that's exactly the kind of thing that we would like to take a look at, and hopefully work with some living experience volunteers or living experience groups to find out how we can improve accessibility. We have had volunteers that have contacted us in advance of training sessions and discuss with us their needs. So somebody who's visually impaired would say, well, this would particularly help me during the course. And we've worked with folk both visually impaired but also hearing impaired. We don't have anything specifically for visually impaired people at the moment, but we do tend to let people know to discuss with us and see how we can help them. But that is definitely a really good question, something we'd like to be looking at.
We've one here from Andrew about, is it possible to contact the designated volunteer for a local square to him, and then be able to join them in the field surveys to gain experience? So it's a bit like the buddying this, is it?
Yeah, very much so. So this is something, do you know, Andrew, we get a lot of questions like this because, of course, quite a few people find that there is a square near them and they get excited and they realize, oh, it's already allocated. But that you've asked the right question there. We don't want to, say to folk, well, that's it. It's designated, it's already allocated. It's of course possible that person might be interested in buddying up or share the load, perhaps shadowing. There's a whole number of things that we could possibly do. So, of course, because of GDPR, we're not able to share details directly. But what we would tend to do is contact that volunteer. We would say we've got somebody else nearby who's really interested. And then we sort of talk to you individually, and then we wouldn't share details unless we have express permission from both of you. to link up, but that certainly is a possibility.
Great. Oh, a bit more complicated one here. Somebody has requested a previously unrecorded square in an upland heathland habitat in Scotland. And the majority of the squares within a grouse moor. They'd like to ask if landowner position is organised prior to any recording, and then additionally, because of the habitat, they'd like to ask whether they can include any non-vascular plant records to help classify fine-scale habitats.
Okay, so there's two questions here, isn't it? So the first question around landowner permission, um, that's something that our volunteers actually need to do. We provide quite a bit of guidance, both in our frequently asked questions, and also we provide a access permission letter template that our volunteers can use. And certainly, if anybody's having any difficulty either finding out landowner details or even getting a response or, discussing the scheme with the landowner, of course, we can support, but we do ask volunteers to request land access permission. That's for a number of reasons. One being we've got literally thousands of squares all over the countryside, so we can't necessarily have a big list of absolutely all landowners, especially because it's quite dynamic with people buying and selling land. And also because, of course, it's our volunteers who are on the ground in the area, and they probably know the area better than, say, I do down in Somerset, and also where they want to put their plots. So that is something that we ask volunteers to do. We do say that you need to ask landowner permission before doing any recording at all. I've noticed you said in Scotland we still say that that needs to happen within Scotland, even with public right of way, because of course we're not just going through, but we're actually taking records, not taking physically, but we are recording information about their land. So as courtesy, we do ask for landowner permissions before any recording takes place. And actually, we find that can be really, really useful because we can find out management information that we might not have otherwise known. We can let them know what dates we're thinking, and they might be able to advise us on different dates that's used to going, especially if there's, you mentioned it's a grouse moor. So I know we've got some volunteers that need to time their surveys around shoots, for example, or heathland burns. So it can be really helpful as well as important to contact the landowner. So the second question around an option to include non-vascular plant records to help classify, where we would say to do that if you are looking for any support in classifying the habitat, of course, all of that information is incredibly helpful. We don't necessarily record it as part of the scheme, but if you're, as I say, contacting us to help us to get help classifying the habitat, that information is really, really helpful. Also, within the survey form, there's a box for any additional information about the site, or about any sort of conditions. So that's where you would put that in as well, just to help us verify that habitat type.
Great. One here about a specific place, Skellig Michael. Somebody's asking, have you thought about it? But I think you'll explain how the squares are actually random selected, and how we can get more. So because they're saying what a great place that might be to record. But
Yes.
if you want to explain about how
Yes,
that works.
I'm guessing there isn't one at Skellig, Michael, if you're asking me if we've thought about it. So the squares are randomly generated, albeit slightly weighted towards those particular habitats that we record in within the NPMS. So basically, sort of almost to avoid us doing that, to keep going to the places that we know are great places to look. We want it to be as randomized as possible, and similarly with the plots within the squares as well. Actually, when people receive their survey guidance notes, they're sort of given recommended sort of random plots almost, to try and avoid kind of going to pick that really lovely patch over in the corner, because of course if we just go to the areas where there's some really lovely assemblages and some lovely species, we might sort of overinflate our understanding of what's going on on the wider countryside. And that's actually another reason why NPMS is so important, is because we have these random squares, but also they're not just surveying those areas that are protected or well managed. It's all semi-natural habitats. So yes, that's I think that's where we were going with that, isn't it, Joe?
Yeah, yeah. I'll read this one out. I think it's about plot setup. Are linear plots determined automatically, or can square linear plots be decided upon after visiting all 5 plots within a square to determine which option is most feasible?
Yes, I mean, it's got to be dependent on what you've got on your square and when you get out and do the recce. So we advise around 3 5 by 5 meter square plots and 2 linear plots. But of course, I mean, that's going to be tricky if you don't have any linear features. So these aren't set in stone. That's what we aim for. So it'll be a case of taking a look at your OS map or your Google map and saying, okay, I can see we've got hedgerows here, or we've got some arable field margins, perhaps even a road verge or a watercourse. Um, so that will basically sort of whittle down for you where your linear plots are going to be. So it does very much need a real combination of recce and walking through the square, and also taking a look at the map.
Yeah, we have a comment here from Anne. A recent webinar explained there are about 56 species of Rubus fruticosus in Scotland, but it would take quite a lot of experience to be confident of identifying them. And thank you for the interesting talk. I think I know maybe you want to explain about infantry level, but I don't think there'd be a box to put all those in. But
No, no, indeed. So this is funny enough. This is part of why we have the different survey levels. So, um, I've mentioned that sort of people that the survey at the wildflower level have around 10 to 15 species per habitat, and then moving up to the indicator level, there's around 30 species per habitat on average. Those species were decided upon. You can only imagine, can't you, the length of time and the round conversations that were going on between the SBI and Plant Life and UKCH and lots and lots of experts in the field at the time to decide upon, whittling down to what indicator species are going to be recorded. And they really decided on with a compromise of, yes, they're species that are very accurate and useful at indicating the health of the habitat, but also, really importantly, they are relatively easy to identify, have few confusion species, for example, um, so that as many folk as possible will be able to get involved. So in the likes of the rubus that you've mentioned, they wouldn't necessarily be on the wildflower or the indicator level. We do have a number of, I can't think of them off the top of my head typically. There are some that we have as aggregates. Groups that people record, so we don't ask them to whittle right the way down to the species level. So that's another option of those, as you say, really tricky groups where it's just a lot of experience to identify between the individual species. But as I mentioned, then we do have the inventory level for those recorders who are completely, of course, capable of identifying all individual species. And it is worth mentioning as well, we have about a third of our volunteers at the last check, and it's been consistently that way, fall within each survey level. And actually, that's quite a lovely indication that our volunteers are developing and progressing, because, as you might imagine, the vast majority of folks start out at the wildflower level while they're sort of getting their eye in, getting themselves familiar with the methodology. It always takes that little bit longer the first time you do these surveys, isn't it? So a lot of people start out at the wildflower level, and then they move up to indicator level. So we see a lot of folk do that. It's certainly not fixed. If you start out at one level, you can move up. We do have some folk who may think, do you know what? I'm super hot in the woodland. I'm happy with these indicator species, but actually I'm starting to get a bit nervous in the grassland. Grasses are my nemesis. So they might record at the wildflower level in a grassland, and at the indicator level in the woodland. So we just want to make sure that folk are able to confidently and consistently record at a level that they're comfortable with.
I think the next question from Peter is sort of just on the same lines. Really, he's just asking, have you preferred level of plant ID ability that you'd like people to have before they register for the scheme?
So it's worth taking a look at the wildflower lists, certainly, and thinking, am I comfortable with these species? Absolutely. We do provide support. The training isn't just around methodology. We provide species and habitat identification support. We all of the species records are verified. They go through iRecord, and they are actually verified in two stages. There's sort of the automated computer sort of level where flags are raised if there's something that's particularly rare or if it's falling outside its normal distribution range, and that needs to be looked at. But also any species that um, are a little bit trickier to identify. They've all kind of got a weighting on them. I'm not sure. It's all very technical, these things, but ultimately, um, volunteers can take photographs and upload a photograph of that species or that particular record with each of the actual species records that are then verified later as well. So that's really useful.
Just one last question, because we're trying to finish there. My kilometre square is mainly grasslays, which are grazed by cattle during the growing season. The hedges don't change much. Is it worth carrying on? Do you know, I could have written that question. It sounds a bit like I didn't, but it sounds like the plot that the square that I monitor.
Yes, it is. I know it can be, it can get a little bit, I'm not seeing a great deal of change, but actually a lot of these things, it takes time. But actually knowing if that something is stable is just, and like similarly, some folks might say to me, "Oh gosh, there's not very much interesting," but actually absence data is just as important as presence data when it comes to these trends as well. So it is 100% worth carrying on. You never know when something might change. But if you fancy a bit of a change up, we are almost always more than happy for folk to adopt a second square. So if there's another square somewhere else that you might want to do in addition to your existing square, or if that's too much to do more than one a year, some folk actually alternate. They do one square one year, another square another year. If you fancied sort of taking on a challenge, learning some new species, or just for a bit of a change. But in terms of the data, yes, it is very much worth carrying on. It's all very useful.
Yeah, no, I understand that one completely. I have the cows in sometimes, so we have to either look over the hedge or over the wall, or just skip that plot for one of the surveys.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
and
that's brilliant. Yeah,
we get somewhere folks say, "Oh my goodness, I had a woodland plot and I've gone this year and it's gone." Whether it's because of a storm or somebody's come in and it's all being cut, and we say we still need to carry as long as you've got access permissions and as long as, of course, it's safe and you're comfortable. Yes, because that's exactly the kind of change we're looking to record. We want to know if there is change or if there isn't change. So yeah, it's always worth carrying on as long as possible.
yeah. Well, thank you so much for all everybody's questions. We're going to have to finish there in a second. You mentioned, Rachel, just about things actually happening in Northern Ireland to do with the Botanical Skills Project,
Yeah.
and we are trying to link up groups, like local groups, with a local square. So if you do know of any, if you're part of a local group, or you want to get involved with that, if you want to contact myself or Kim on the NPS website or BSBI website. And also, I think you mentioned too about working with the big landowners, National Trust and Ulster Wildlife, RSPB, NIA, and getting them more involved with the NPMS project. So lots happening, and there'll be lots of in the field events too for NPMS right through the year. So watch out for those, both in Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK. I just again like to thank you, Rachel, for a brilliant talk and
Thank you for
everything.
having me.
And if you have any more questions that we didn't get time to answer, you can always contact NPMS support or
Yeah.
ourselves in the Botanical Skills Project in Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
So I think that's all for tonight. So
Yeah,
next week,
that's
yeah,
everything. So I would say as well, if you are part of a local group or a recording group or a interest group, and you have people that might be interested within the group, do let us know, because we can always provide a little bit of text or something for a newsletter or anything like that. Yes, do spread the word. Yes.
yeah. So next week, I don't know if I mentioned at the beginning, it's uh, totally forgotten now. It's the same time next week. Club Mosses, with Fred Rumsey. So if you come back again, and then the next following Tuesdays there'll be a webinar on every Tuesday. So that's about it from us, and we'll see you next week if you're able to join us. And you can just, if you want to spread the word, you just go on the BSBI website and you'll find all the webinars there and other events coming up. Okay, then so good night, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for bearing with me. Bye now.
Bye.